as I have for quite some time. Of course, when we first got that notice on Sunday night that she was missing, and then we started learning more as the hours went by. But one of the strange things that happened early on in the case, now, we had the first communication about the ransom demand.
Right.
This was for millions of dollars made to TMZ and then also a local news outlet in Tucson. But in addition to that, we started getting more things that were happening. And one in particular was a guy making a ransom demand for Bitcoin.
Yes.
We've kind of heard this over and over before, but the authorities were quickly able to trace who that guy was and rule out that he didn't have Nancy, right?
Right. And this was Derek Kayea, who we have, I believe, his mugshot or an updated there he is. That's quite the mugshot.
Quite the mugshot, yes.
But this was early on, as you mentioned, and I think what really struck us in the news business about this was that we had all of these ransom notes, alleged ransom notes. You know, we are hearing now that we don't know really what the status of those were in terms of whether they were legit or not. But then you have this that just got wrapped up so quickly. It seemed like he did this and they found him. And then there's so many other elements of this story that are just completely, you know, we're back to square one. It seems like in some ways. So to have this person connected to the case and have him, you know, he pled guilty now.
Guilty plea, right.
Just basically, it's so different from how so much of the coverage with the rest of this case has gone. That's what struck me about this. Right.
Well, and I remember the hours after we learned about the 42-year-old man in Hawthorne, California. It was just kind of amazing to think that, whoa, somebody would do this.
Oh, I know.
That in the course of what is a national search for Nancy Guthrie, you know, taken from her home, those first 48 hours matter so much.
Right.
And this was on February 4th. So we're talking about, 4 days from when she went missing. In those first few hours, that's when he sent this out. So still just a frantic search to find her. And we know that the family is going through just the horror of losing a loved one, where they're trying to find them, see if they're still alive, hanging on to every thread, every hope that maybe someone will tell them where their mother is. There's a request, why was she taken?
Right.
Then we get this communication from this guy. And at first, I think everybody was looking at, okay, there's all the cards are on the table. If there's any communication, they have to be treated seriously.
Right.
But clearly this wasted resources for him to plead guilty. And I believe he faces penalty, the max on this, because this is the Telecommunications Fraud Act. So it was just 2 counts of harassment using a telecommunication device. We're still waiting on his sentencing, but the maximum penalty is just 2 years, a $250,000 fine or both, and then a year of supervised release. So seems certainly with the pain and suffering that the family was going through, some might think that he got off pretty easy there.
Yeah, I would say that a lot of people will probably be frustrated to hear that is what the maximum is for a crime like this, especially when he admitted that he was trying to harass the family in their time of need. That's going to frustrate a lot of people, especially with how high profile this case has been. It also makes you wonder, when he, gets out, depending on what his sentencing ends up being, where will the case be? Because that's what we continue to go back and forth on, is how far really are we into this investigation with all of the news that has come out in the past few days over the ransom notes, the back and forth between the FBI, the sheriff's office that we've seen, for months now. But
well, let's go through a little bit of that because I thought it was interesting this week where we had Reuters report on Tuesday. They said they had this big exclusive report. And it's been a little frustrating, at least as a reporter, as a journalist, going through, seeing this process play out to where it's anonymous sources that are giving all of this information, and don't need to tell you, but the basics of journalism, with always verifying what your sources are saying, especially where they're not willing to go on the record and give it to you. That there has to be kind of a higher standard there of what they're saying matching with the facts.
You have to vet it. You have to vet it a little bit, and I think especially when you know that the eyes are going to be on any update that you give. In this case, I mean, people are continuing to be just enthralled by this case. We still see it perform. Anytime we have a story regarding Nancy Guthrie's case, it performs very well on the website. And so you know that it's performing well nationally. Anytime Savannah gets on the desk and says something about her mom's case, it goes viral. And so I think it's, I would say borderline irresponsible, if not just outright irresponsible, to go that in depth with something, and then you've got the FBI coming back. You don't know where it all lies, but you definitely have to vet that stuff.
Yes.
In any case, but especially in one that is going to take off like that. That every single word of every report release is going to be scrutinized by people.
Exactly. And Reuters reporting that all 3 of the demand letters, according to their FBI sources, were saying were bogus, were fake. They did not believe that they were real. There was no truth in them.
Yeah.
But then we saw what happened yesterday, where first FBI Director Kash Patel was asked during an unrelated press conference, did he have a comment on the matter with what was playing out? And he declined to comment on it and said, actually, I'm going to push it back to the local authorities to ask about, do they believe any of those ransom demand letters were authentic?
Yeah.
And then over the course of a few hours, we got the official statement from the FBI saying that, pushing back on all the notes were fake. They said, well, it is they were looking at them as if they may potentially be legitimate. And the course of the investigation was still under the premise of a kidnapping for the purposes of a ransom.
Right.
So pretty clear that they were pushing back.
So much back and forth. Yes. Yeah. So much back and forth.
And then we had Pima County respond immediately after, saying, we are not going to specifically comment on the contents of the ransom demand letters. We're actively investigating it. But then they pushed it back on the FBI. Yeah. So to me, it was just this, Abbott and Costello game of who's on first.
Right. Who's in charge here? What is the message that we need to be sending out here?
And you certainly see the vacuum there of, we don't have a clear path of, this is what the lead investigators are saying. Here are the facts for everybody out there, leaving no room for speculation. Instead, that's exactly what we're setting the stage for. Just
continuing to set doubt in people's minds about where the investigation really is and what progress has been made.
Well, and I think the bigger point that we could discuss real quick is just where are we at with this case now. I do want to bring in, we have a very special guest with us, retired FBI Special Agent Jennifer Coffindaffer.
Hi, Jennifer.
Jennifer, always a pleasure to have you here with us discussing this. But can you talk about just the ups and downs this week with so much being out there? Where are we at right now with this investigation?
Well, the big news, of course, that you guys were just running down are all of these messages. What's real, what's not, right? That was the big point. And then to have Reuters come out and say, whoa, wait a minute, none of these messages are even actually real, at least according to an FBI quote unquote source. This is the problem. And this is the only second time that the FBI has come out and actually made a statement. And I think that is very critical, that they came out and said, not so fast, Reuters. We are not saying that. There are many extortion letters. I call them the TMZ 12, right? Those letters are the extortion letters that aren't real. But when it comes to the first 2, we're still looking into that. And just the fact they would come out and do that is very significant.
What do you think people in the general public, still so enthralled in this case and so dedicated to, staying on top of it? What do you think they should take away from the, back and forth we've seen this week?
Well, unfortunately, I think we have to take away that no one is really playing that nice in the sandbox. It's hard to build a beautiful sandcastle when you have the two people in charge that don't seem to be on the same page. So, unfortunately, I think that is one takeaway from today when you have Kash Patel saying, listen, we can't give any information because they're in charge. And then you have Pima County Sheriff saying, we can't give any information because the FBI is in charge of the letters. So, unfortunately, I just hate to see this, because you wonder how that might be impacting the ability to really successfully investigate this case.
Jennifer, yesterday we had on to discuss about the search efforts. The Vice President of the United Cajun Navy, Brian Trasher, he was talking about his efforts when they deployed out there to Tucson in the days after Nancy was taken, offering to Chris Nanos, hey, we have all this tech, we have these personnel ready to go, we have canine units, etc., really every bit that can help. And they were rebuffed and told to stand down, that the sheriff was not interested in what they had to offer. Can you talk a little bit about, with where we're at right now, with what we know, the evidence as it is, does a thorough search of the area around Nancy's home, the Catalina foothills, does that still need to be done?
It still needs to be done. It's really shocking that they were rebuffed, and not only them, but other search groups, EcuSearch, the Madres Buscadoras, all of these groups that just want to help. And there's such a manpower magnifier, right? It's a force multiplier that you could have looking at the Sonoran Desert and this Catalina foothill area, which is so vast. And you never know if there's indicia of the crime that the perpetrators could have thrown out. You never know if Nancy Guthrie, her remains could be there. I know that's terrible to say, but that's what needs to be searched. And I just don't understand. This is my point of view. Unless the FBI and Pima County know where Nancy is, there is nothing that should hold back search efforts. Absolutely nothing.
And I think too, just if we could talk a little bit about the developments today, where you had a California man, 42 years old, plead guilty to faking these ransom demand letters. Now, the contents of what he initially was describing, where he had said, of course, that he had something to do with the kidnapping, but demanding Bitcoin, that seemed eerily similar to the other communication that we had that the FBI said may be potentially legitimate.
Yeah, these Bitcoin ransoms, that is the wave of the future. Back in 2023, there were actually $1.2 billion paid in Bitcoin ransoms, over 800 million in 2024 and up to 800 million.
Jen, I'm sorry, real quick. I asked you a question. We're about to go to break, but can you hold with us real quick? We'll catch you on the other side of this and take it from there. All right, welcome back to Fox 10 Talks. We're talking, of course, about the Nancy Guthrie investigation, all the developments that we've been learning this week with the FBI reporting about the demand letters and their credibility. The Bureau leaving the door open on there may be potentially some credibility there, and they are certainly investigating this as a kidnapping for the purposes of a ransom. We're joined right now by Jennifer Coffindaffer. She's a retired FBI special agent and has been following this case from the jump. Jennifer, you were continuing about the notes and their contents, and with this guilty plea today, there seems to be a pretty sharp divide on what they're both talking about.
Right. You know, when you look at what Derek Colella got, it's really so disappointing. You were talking about somebody who extorted two family members in this case, and he got a slap on the wrist, 5 months on two different counts of probation, and they will be held concurrent with each other, meaning he's got 5 months of probation. He was let out the next day after he was arrested, only having to pay $2,000 on a $20,000 bond. It really shows you that even though there's actually bite in the statute, they are not doing anything to crack down. Just imagine if you could extort a family for Bitcoin for millions of dollars and you knew the only thing you're going to get is probation out of it. You know, there's nothing to stop these heinous criminals from continuing to do this.
Yeah, we figured that there would be quite a bit of backlash as to the lack of, sentencing that he really got in terms of the time compared to the emotional trauma he put them through. We really appreciate your time, Jennifer. Before we go, we wanted to ask you what people in the public should be paying attention to as we kind of continue to hear about these ransom notes, hear from the FBI, hear from the local sheriff. What should people really be keying in on in this case in the days and weeks to come?
Well, I think the number one thing that was disclosed is this is a kidnap for ransom case. So sort of all those other scenarios aren't what the FBI is investigating. The biggest thing is keeping the eye out for Porch Guy, looking for somebody in people's worlds that isn't acting appropriately, that has changed their behavior. That's what's going to catch Porch Guy.
Retired FBI Special Agent Jennifer Coffindaffer, really appreciate all that you do. And can you tell folks who want to watch you at home, I know you have your own show where you go over this in further detail. How can folks see it?
Yes, absolutely. Break the Case with Jen Coffindaffer on YouTube, True Crime with Jen Coffindaffer, wherever you get podcasts, and then also at Coffindaffer FBI on Twitter/X. I do daily commentary.
And I love to see it as it happens.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jen. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, let's talk about just something I've been fascinated with since I was a kid. I think when James Cameron just blew my mind when I was a young kid watching Titanic in theaters. I've always been fascinated by that. I had a great-grandmother that lived well into her nearly 100.
Wow.
And I remember her telling me about the Titanic when it happened, just the news headlines at the time. And well, this was a little bit before radio, but she was talking about just how even in Texas, they were all fascinated with the ship and with the passengers and the tragedy as it happened. And now it's kind of, it's developed a myth, I think, too, a mystique, but still has our attention so much.
Oh, it's just such an incredible case when you talk about all of the different people that were there, all of the things that maybe could have gone differently. There's just so much that you can discuss with this huge tragedy. And we have someone who can speak to it a lot better than we can here.
Set us straight on that.
Yes, Jessica Sanders, thanks for joining us.
Jessica, you're the exhibition host of Titanic, an Immersive Voyage in Scottsdale. Correct. So cool. Opens this week, correct?
Tomorrow.
Tomorrow.
It opens tomorrow to the public tomorrow. So yes, Yes, thank you so much for having me.
Of course. So this is a traveling exhibit.
Correct.
Okay, so tell us a little bit about what people can expect when they come and check this out. You see exhibits for the Titanic in certain places, but what makes this one special?
So Titanic: An Immersive Journey is a new way to experience the Titanic story. So guests will come in and they will see from the building of the ship all the way down, and using technology to immerse themselves with virtual reality to be able to explore the wreck site too. So it goes through the whole story of Titanic.
Yeah, and obviously that kind of virtual technology, things like that, not something that we've always been able to utilize to really immerse yourself in it. Can you give a couple of examples of what people might get to experience with that?
Oh, absolutely. So going through the exhibition, we've got full-scale reproductions of certain areas of the ship, and even a lifeboat. So you'll have an opportunity to sit within the lifeboat to get a sense of the size in an immersive environment. It's a very touching and very emotional scene.
One thing that always stands out to me, I'm a little bit of a history buff, or at least enthusiast. I don't know about expert, but I'm always fascinated with the story of the Titanic. I mean, just the name Titanic that they had, where this idea of invincibility and kind of humanity's hubris, if you will, that we can beat the elements in nature, ingenuity, technology. We just need to soldier through it, and we can do that. That still seems obviously to be something we're dealing with in 2026, but a lot of the parallels there with thinking that it's safe enough to take anywhere, that this latest technology could withstand the elements of nature, but clearly this was the worst disaster of its time.
Absolutely, and I think that those lessons are still very relevant today. So Titanic had on board the latest and greatest technology, the Marconi telegraph. But technology provides the information. It wasn't that the information was there. They received the warnings, but information is only as good as what you do with it. And so some of those messages never made it to the bridge, or they weren't prioritized. So, and the other part too is there's a misconception that people think that it was the iceberg that sank Titanic. And yes, it was the catalyst, but there were a series of failures that happened up until then. The regulations were outdated. There wasn't life preparedness training, and again, this communication issue. So a lot of what you see now, the regulations that you have in place, if you go on a cruise ship today and you do the drills, those directly come from the tragedy in Titanic.
When people come and experience this in that vein, what do you hope that they take away from it? Obviously, the immersive experience is going to be one thing, but what kind of lessons or attention do you want to draw people out to talk when they leave the experience?
So a lot of people come to the Titanic story through the movie. And the story of Titanic is bigger than a movie. It's bigger than any one person. And so what we would like for people to understand it's a human story. This is a story, yes, about a ship, but there were more than 2,000 passengers and crew on that ship, and each one represents a story. And so if you leave the exhibition and you learn a name of a passenger that maybe you didn't know before you went, then this exhibition will have served history well.
Love that.
Well, and one thing I think, in addition to, I mean, I could talk all day long with the social commentary of it, you have the class structure on board the ship, which very endemic of that, but 1912 and the parallels with 2026. A lot of people say we're back in our own really gilded age of its own. But as you're getting to know each one of these stories and personalizing them, was there anything that just stood out to you that just totally shocked you, the humanity that you saw in these people?
Well, the thing about the Titanic story is that there's so many different elements, there's so many entry points to the story, whether it's the engineering, the post-Edwardian society, whether it was the wreck itself and decisions that people made in unprecedented chaos. One of the stories that struck me, and every time I learn a story, then I think it's the one, and then I learn another story. Annie Funk was a missionary, and she was safely on a lifeboat. And there was a woman that was there. Her children were already on the lifeboat. She gave up her seat.
Wow.
And perished. And, for me, it's a point of reflection. You say, when you encounter yourself in chaos and crisis, will you be your best self? Could I have made that decision? Could any of us? You don't know.
Right.
You can't possibly know. And there are 2,000 more stories just like that.
Oh.
We got about 30
So
seconds left. Jessica,
Okay.
if you could tell folks it opens tomorrow in Scottsdale.
Absolutely.
How can they see this?
So you want to go to expo-titanic.com, and you can click either the Scottsdale or the Phoenix link. That will take you to the ticketing webpage. It opens tomorrow. The location is 4301. That's North Scottsdale Drive. It's at the corner of 5th and North